Basic Education 2017-2018 School Monitoring Survey shows an improvement of most schools in the country. However, textbook and infrastructure shortages at some schools still remain a concern. The Department of Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga released the 2017-2018 School Monitoring Survey in Pretoria a short while ago. Well, for more on this story, we cross to my colleague Patricia Visagie, who's standing by for us in Pretoria. Good afternoon, Patricia. What's the latest? What came out of that report?
Well, good afternoon, and good afternoon to our viewers as well. Now, the report is, of course, conducted from about 1,000 schools nationally. So I'm standing by with Dr. Stevens Taylor. He just compiled the report. He helped to compile the findings in the report, and he also did the presentation. So let's get straight into it with him. Let's talk about the textbook issue. We see that there are still some schools in the country where learners still don't have textbooks. I mean, the first quarter of the 2019 academic year is already done, but we're still sitting with this issue. It's not a new issue. It has caused a lot of headache and headlines a couple of years ago, but we're still dealing with it. So let's talk about that. What are the findings on that?
Sure. So we're in 2019 now, but the school monitoring survey, which we released today, was undertaken in 2017. And it did show, I think it was a broadly positive result on textbooks. It showed that when it comes to workbooks, that about 95% of children had access to the required textbooks, and with workbooks. And with textbooks, it was about 85%. So the important thing is that it has improved quite considerably over the past few years. You'll remember in 2012 there was a very specific issue in Limpopo that I think got the nation's attention and even our attention in the national department. I think a lot of systems have been put in place to improve things, but there are still challenges, as you say, and a lot of that comes down to things at a school level and a provincial level where one needs not only to deliver the books but also to have appropriate retrieval systems in place and maintenance systems in place.
Right. As you have mentioned, the research was compiled for the year 2017 and obviously 2018. But as we stand now, is there perhaps an indication to maybe just give us a clarity in terms of what the improvements are that have been implemented to bridge those gaps?
So I think there have been improvements in the operational monitoring systems of the department, from national, how we provide that oversight, the systems we have to ensure that we have all the right addresses and the right logistics sorted out for figuring out which grades and subjects are needed for every school. So those things have, I think, improved, and a lot of measures have been put in place, especially in response to the particular issues that we experienced a few years ago.
How does that, those shortcomings, in particular the issue of workbooks and textbooks, how does that impact on the quality of education, basic education in the country?
I think it's a very important thing. I think we need to be providing those kinds of support and prioritizing those forms of resources, and I think we have. I think if we look in the last 5-10 years, it has been a particular focus of the minister. The workbook initiative was something which didn't exist previously, and this was something that the minister introduced, and I think has dramatically changed just the access to text, whether it's a textbook or a workbook. If you look at classrooms now compared to maybe 10 years ago, there is just more text, and children are interacting with that text more than they were, say, 10 years ago.
And I mean, these days we also have the digital classroom, so it has really improved, linking up to the whole fourth industrial revolution that the country is now navigating towards.
That's right. So a lot of the textbooks and workbooks have now been digitized, and there are plans being made for the next 5-10 years around expanding the use of technology in the education system. Part of that is about materials, making them available in a digital format. Part of it is simply getting the basics around connectivity right. And that was also one of the things that I think this survey pointed to, an area where there's still a lot of work to be done, just ensuring that all schools have access to internet connectivity.
And your findings on school infrastructure? just take us through that?
Yes, so I think we're very well aware at the moment of the infrastructure, the needs, and we know the President has taken the initiative to offer more support to the sector around things like sanitation. So there's a lot of work currently happening there. And I think what this survey showed is that it's more than just the delivery of the facilities by the department. It's also the functionality of those systems, such as running water, functional electricity on the day of the visit. We found that whilst systems may be there, they may not be always functioning. And so it requires municipal services, it requires maintenance systems at a school level, as well as obviously the support from the department.
The Minister also highlighted concern on the model that government has been using over the years for infrastructure delivering at the various schools. What are your findings on that, and how do we change that model?
So the school monitoring survey didn't really look into the model. It just looked at schools on a particular day, were the facilities in place and functioning. So the model that the Minister, I think, was referring to is things like the funding mechanisms, to what extent funds go through provinces, through the education infrastructure grant, versus in more recent years how we've added things like the CD program, the Accelerated School Initiative program. So there we're doing a lot of extra things, maybe channeling them through conditional grants through the national department. So it's about doing those extra things to ensure that the delivery of the facilities happens, and then improving the systems at a provincial level as well, so that money is in fact prioritized towards infrastructure.
And the other issue that you guys looked into is absent teachers. That also hampers schooling severely. So your findings on that?
Absolutely. We measured the rate of teacher attendance on any given day, and we found that it was about 10% absenteeism rates. So that's it is higher than one would like, but it's not out of line with international norms for teacher attendance. There are obvious reasons why teachers will not always be at school. And so I think it's about minimizing the disruptive events. I think sometimes, especially in the deeper rural areas, there are many other events that when they happen, whether it's funeral services or teacher meetings or things that perhaps because of the transport logistics in those areas often lead to a lost teaching time, and it's about minimizing those events and the disruption that they cause.
Just lastly, just to give better understand, why is it important to do the survey and do the continuous monitoring of performance at schools, and really just the shortages, the successes that the country is embarking on or has achieved in terms of quality education, and really giving accessibility to all pupils, equal accessibility to be precise?
Absolutely. So I think we've seen big improvements in access to school and even in the quality of schooling, but we know that to get further improvements, a lot of detailed work has to be done, and a survey like this informs the planning. It informs understanding the existing situation, understanding the progress that has been made, the effect of specific policies, and that will inform us at this time as we plan for the next 5 years. But more than it's a planning tool for the department, we're making these reports and this data available publicly. So it is a resource for researchers and for the public to better understand the school system, for all involved to understand it better, and in that way to contribute to improving things.
All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Stevens-Taylor, he is part of Basic Education, because he's, I think, a director there for research and monitoring and evaluation at Department of Basic Education. Just taking us through the survey that has been released today that give us more or less an indication in terms of what is happening at the country's schools nationally, and where are there still shortcomings, of course, showing great improvement, but also highlighting that more work still needs to be done, especially when it comes to the holistic rollout of textbooks and making sure that all schools have adequate infrastructure, in particular sanitation infrastructure that we know has caused a lot of outrage in the country, in particular with some schools still having pit toilets, where we have learned with shock that children still fall into those particular pit toilets. So the department saying that they're working around the clock to make sure that those issues are addressed, and that the needs of those particular schools are catered for adequately. So I think let's give it back to studio for now.
Thanks for that report, Patricia. Transport Minister Bladen Zimmer